Ladies, gentlemen, brethren, good evening, happy new year. Hope you are in fine fettle. Welcome to this evening's Solomon Live. My name is Brody, I'll be hosting tonight's proceedings in just a matter of minutes. Quite simply, at the moment, just trying to get you all in place so you don't miss a thing when we begin at 7:30. You can submit your questions this evening to our very distinguished guest. However, I'm not sure how many we are going to get through in the next 45 minutes or so, but I will give it my best shot. Tonight's Solomon Live, what's the future of Freemasonry? With our new program master, Jonathan Spence. We'll begin in just a couple of minutes' time. Ladies, gentlemen, brethren, good evening, happy new year. Welcome to Solomon Live. We are just a moment away from beginning our webinar with the program master, Jonathan Spence. Our Solomon Live this evening, as it says, hopefully on your screen, what is the future of Freemasonry? Ladies, gentlemen, brethren, good evening, happy new year, and I really do hope you've had a wonderful festive period. We're live across the UK, we are live across the world for this evening's Solomon Live, our first of 2023. I'm Brody, I have the honour of being the Provincial Communications Officer for the distinguished province of Worcestershire, and also the honour of hosting these monthly webinars of lively, engaging Freemason conversation. Now, as always, you can submit any questions this evening via the question and answer facility on Zoom, just at the bottom of your screen there. So without any further ado, this evening's Solomon Live is what's the future of Freemasonry? So please welcome the new program master, Jonathan Spence. Jonathan, how the devil are you?
Very well, thank you, Brody, and happy New Year to you.
Did you have a nice Christmas, by the way?
Yeah, very good. We were in Madrid visiting my wife's family, and then we came back because my poor son's got a lot of exams at the end of this term, so he had to study. So we were at home for a quiet New Year.
Good. And do you feel refreshed and revitalised and ready to go for it again?
Yes, luckily.
Oh, it's got in the blink of an eye, isn't it? Now, what I thought we could do before we get to our topic is just ask you how your new role of program master is going so far.
Well, I suppose you really ought to ask somebody else that. But am I enjoying it? Yes. It's been an interesting last 3 months from the installation in September right through, because as we will discuss, there's been an awful lot of work done over the last 3 months, and you yourself are very aware of that, having been involved with some of the work.
Absolutely.
So it's been very, very busy. And one of the things I always say to people is, don't forget, I also work.
Yes. Well, it's absolutely true, isn't it? You may be our program master, but you're one of those people who have to balance work life with Freemasonry as well. And what have you really enjoyed about the job since September? What have you really enjoyed so far?
Really meeting people and engaging with them, having the discussions to try and get us to where we hope to be, and taking on board all sorts of advice. That's been really very good. I mean, I've met with pretty well all the provincial rulers. Managed to get to the odd lodge meeting as well, which is helpful. So it's been very good in that respect.
And I've got to ask you as well, that's been the best part of the job. What's been the worst part of the job so far?
Constant phone calls.
Oh, non-stop. I was just hoping you wasn't going to say Solomon Live, Jonathan.
No, I've been spared that until tonight. So far, so good on that one.
So let's begin our conversation this evening. Why we've got well over 1,000 people joining us here this evening. Let's talk about the strategy. Why now? Tell me about the strategy. Let's call it an elevator pitch, if you will.
Okay. Well, as everyone on the call will know, or most people on the call will know, we had a strategy from 2015 to 2020, and clearly we're now in 2022, and COVID got in the way for a couple of years. So therefore, it was quite sensible for us to think about, well, what do we want to try and achieve over the next 5-7 year period? So we've opted for a 7-year period. And what in essence it is that Freemasonry wants to be and is a thriving organization. We want to keep ourselves as a thriving organization that people not only want to join, but to want to remain members of. So, sometimes we spend a lot of time talking about getting new members, but almost take for granted the fact that we've got a lot of members. And we've had a period of time where, for a variety of reasons, the number of members has declined over a period, but we've still got very active, thriving lodges and chapters, and we want to build on that. So we've come up with this idea. We have our values on which we base everything. And we came up with, and I'm sure you will have seen it, it's sort of, I'm almost going to do something I shouldn't do, this Grecian temple, the pillars. And so you have as the ground on which we build everything is the integrity, friendship, respect, and charity. We want strong foundations, which is making sure that the organization works as it ought to support the members. And then we have 3 pillars supporting the roof, which is the challenge we're trying to fulfill, which is being a thriving membership organization, which people want to join and stay members of. So we have the pillar of thriving membership, coherent organization, and then community engagement. And like all organizations, some of those things are going really well at the moment. Community engagement. Clearly, we've seen a lot of that very publicly over the period of the pandemic, but it's continuing. We've become much more of a coherent organization over the last 4 or 5 years, thanks to people like the comms, PCOs and comms and everything. So we're starting to work together, and the MCF worked really well with Grand Lodge and Grand Chapter, and Grand Lodge, Grand Chapter working well with provinces, and hopefully they're working well with their lodges and chapters. But it's focusing on the thriving membership and making sure that it's not just that people want to become Masons, but they want to stay Masons all the way through. I mean, I'm lucky I've been a Mason for 40 years, and yes, I still want to be a Mason. And that's what I hope for all of our members, and to keep everyone engaged and understand that that's what we're about as a member organization.
Absolutely. Yes, it's essential that we bring in new members, and we've got to look after those members that we have already. And one of the things I really enjoyed you talking about was the no because and yes if during your address and when we were speaking as well. Tell me about that, Jonathan.
It's all to do with trying to get the conversation right. And certainly when I was a young Mason, any time you tried to suggest an innovation, it was no because was the standard answer. And we're not alone in that. There are lots and lots of membership organizations, be it rugby referee societies or rugby clubs or cricket clubs, where it's a standard answer, no, because we've always done it that way, partly because, of course, it's worked. Whereas yes, if changes the nature of the conversation, yes, we could do this if we can address the following issues, challenges, because if you think about it, the really successful organizations, I mean, we have been an organization for over 300 years. And clearly our predecessors in 1717 would still recognize lodges, and they might even recognize Grand Lodge. But it has changed over that period, and it's changed because it's innovated as society itself has changed, but it's still very recognizable as the same organization. And that's the same with a lot of our institutions in this country, be it the monarchy, parliament, the judiciary, the police service, whatever the armed forces, whatever organization that has been sustained for a long period of time, it's both adapted to the change in the environment in which it's operating, but stayed true to its principles. Well, if we say yes, if, there is the chance of trying new things, trying to see whether they will work. If we're lucky, some will. Not all of them will, and we'd be very unwise to think that they would all work. But equally, some might just need slightly tweaking to achieve what we want to achieve. And there's a whole range of relatively small incremental steps that might be done to help the organization be successful going into the fourth decade of the century in 2030 and beyond by possibly doing some different things now, but by always remaining true to what we're about.
And keeping that very dear to us. So why now for the strategy? What's the challenge we're responding to the most, would you say, Jonathan?
For those on the call that have actually watched the video that was made after the quarterly communication, it ends up saying the membership challenge. The membership challenge is getting the balance right between the number of memberships coming in and minimizing the losses. There are some losses that are inevitable, so that we can grow as an organization, making sure we get the right people into the organization and that they want to stay in it. And it's called the membership challenge. And that's something that we are able to do now because the 2015 to 2020 strategy has ended. And we could either continue without any strategy at all, which I think is, well, it's an option. I'm not necessarily sure it's the right option for any organization, but and to engage as much as we can with the membership, because it is the membership that will make this work or not work. And being very clear as to, we're all in this. We've all got a role to play. It doesn't matter whether we're entered apprentices or a provincial officer or a grand officer or, dare I say it, a ruler, program master. We've all got a role to play in making sure that the organization of which we're all very proud to be part not only continues, but it actually thrives.
Absolutely. And how important is it for you to visit Grand Lodge, the districts, the provinces yourself to see what's going on? I mean, for example, you're paying us a visit in Worcestershire this Saturday, which we're very much looking forward to hosting you. But how important is it for you to see what's going on out there? Feet on the ground, if you will.
It's very important. It's not just for me, but also for all the rulers, and also to make sure that we listen and interact. Yes, there is a requirement for some leadership, but also the leadership needs to engage. And we can only engage if we get out, not only to our own lodges, but visit provinces. As you know, I'm going to the Worcestershire Installed Masters Lodge to, funny enough, chat about this. But that way, and having a genuine dialogue, so we will work out what it is that really works, what's worth trying, and take it from there. And being honest about it, if we don't innovate, we'll never know whether something would work. But equally, we've got to be brave enough to say that didn't quite achieve what we were hoping to achieve. And we can chat a bit later on about some of the other aspects about this, because this goes down to members in individual lodges and chapters as much as it does to rulers visiting lodges and chapters. But you really, when I go to an event, I love to be in the bar chatting before we go into dinner, just with the members. And I've done it all the time that I've been Deputy Grand Master. My very first bicentenary was in Bristol as Deputy Grand Master. So I grabbed my drink, went down in the bar, and spent a really good 25, 30 minutes wandering around, talking to the members and listening to them. And I still remember it. It was in 2009, there was a member who had got there even though he was struggling with terminally ill cancer. He was terminally ill with cancer. And I still remember the conversation I had with him. Very sadly, he died about 6 weeks later. So he was very brave to get there. But it meant so much to him to be there for the bicentenary. And those are the sorts of things that that is so much what it's about, getting out and meeting the members, then reflecting on it, and then thinking, what is it that the rulers as a team can do to get it right for the members?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the plan, and for those who don't know, because we've got Freemasons who have been Freemasons for many years, those who have recently joined the fraternity, and perhaps a few joining us this evening who are considering joining. So we need to mention that the plan is for both Craft and Royal Arch. So what are the unique challenges for Royal Arch, would you say, Jonathan?
I've said this on a number of occasions recently, that the United Grand Lodge of England is unique amongst Grand Lodges in the world in that the Royal Arch is stated to be an integral part of being a member of the Grand Lodge. But over the years, we've never really, to my mind, got a really convincing explanation as to how the Royal Arch fits and why it is an integral part of what we do. I mean, it's easy for me to say I've been a member of the Royal Arch for 38 years and a craft mason for 40 years. And one of the challenges, it seems to me, is we need to be better at articulating and giving a really persuasive explanation of how the Royal Arch fits. I mean, it's interesting because the craft and the Royal Arch rulers, we work as one team. So we have the second Grand Principal and the third Grand Principal. The third Grand Principal recently did a provincial installation for both the Craft and the Royal Arch in Cheshire. That had never been done before. So usually, if it was a double header, it would be a Craft ruler, because the Craft rulers are automatically past Royal Arch rulers. But we're in a situation where we have a past Metropolitan Grand Master, a past Provincial Grand Master. There's no reason on earth why they shouldn't do it. And by doing that, we're signalling how integrated the Craft and the Royal Arch are amongst the rulers. Many provinces work extremely well together, but it's explaining to members what it is about the Royal Arch. And there are a lot of craft masons that, for whatever reason, haven't had time, doesn't appeal. Well, that's fine, but we're not really yet, to my mind, giving a very good, a clear explanation as to why it is. The other thing I would say is it's really important that very important that any member that decides to become a Royal Arch Mason does it at the time that's right for them.
Yes, and that's the important thing.
It's very counterproductive to actually push someone into doing something extra if their family position, their work position is such they haven't got time or whatever it may be. And that's why it's something that I hope people will explore, but it's up to them.
Yeah. And that's the key, isn't it? And an interesting question from Simon Fellerman. He says, if the connection between the Craft and Royal Arch are to be seamless, why aren't usually in Supreme Grand Chapter just merged together? Oh, that's a good one.
Well, on the basis of an approach of yes, if, well, let's see where we go. But I mean, it's been set up in that way for 200 plus years. It works effectively, partly because, of course, when we go, I've just been invited to Scotland. The Grand Chapter in Scotland is completely separate. And I don't think we want to go back to the 18th century where you went out of your craft lodge straight into the Royal Arch and what have you. That was, after all, one of the reasons for the splits in the middle of the 18th century. But we'll see. I think that the Grand Lodge and Grand Chapter can continue to work effectively and more effectively together in a more joined up way. I think that's what I would focus on first, rather than a merger. Merger sounds awfully corporate.
It does, doesn't it? But thank you, Simon, for your question. And ladies and gentlemen, brethren and companions, of course, I'll try and get to a few more in just a moment. But let's focus more on the development of the 7-year strategy, because you've spoken briefly about it. Who was involved in it? How did the process start? Because we often hear about a strategy, but lots of hard work has gone into this before you and I were having this conversation today.
Yeah, well, that's very kind. And it's first thing to say, it's been a team effort. I mean, the 2020 strategy was coming to an end, and my predecessor as program master, Peter Lyons, asked me to form a strategy group to consider where do we go next. And so a small team comprising the president of the board, the deputy president of the board, the grand secretary, provincial grand master, the metropolitan deputy grand master, and others. And then we bolted on a couple of younger, newer members to it. We kicked it around, and you'll have seen the annual report that the Rogues Gallery, as I call it. And so we started during the COVID thing with a whole series of Zoom calls, kicking around the ideas, what mattered, what was the challenge. And to formulate strategy, you've got to be really clear of what is the challenge you're trying to address. I think we've been really clear, it's the membership challenge. Making sure that why become a Freemason, why remain a Freemason. We really take that head on. And it's all very well. We then had a 30 or so brethren, a sort of sounding board that we kicked around ideas with. They came back, we then took it around. And we got into a position where we thought, well, this might just have a bit of be going the right way. And so we did a series of roadshows to provincial grandmasters, grand superintendents, the metropolitan grandmaster, and then the district grandmasters. And to say that the presentation that we did started off in May, and by the time I got to the last one of those presentations, we were on version 22.
Version 22, wow.
Yeah, because how it worked was I did all bar two, and David Wootton did quite a number. And then we were joined by different members of the strategy group, and we would meet with provincial grandmasters and grand superintendents, and then we did Zoom calls with the district grandmasters and grand superintendents. And I asked for feedback. So at the end of it, they got my personal email address, and I said, I want your genuine feedback. And which they did, and we took it on board. And then for some of the provincial rulers, they were surprised when they got a follow-up email from me. And I'm sure two of them who know exactly who they are if they're on this call, they both got emails from me within a matter of minutes of each other. And they said, I bet it's the same email. And they compared notes on their iPhones. And no, it wasn't. Each email was tailored for the points that they had raised and asked follow-up. And so we asked them follow-up questions, asked for more. And that's why I say this has been very much a teamwork piece of effort. And, you know, when you've had the engagement of the grand superintendents, provincial grandmasters, and district grandmasters, clearly the main thrust, most of what we say in the strategy is mainly relevant for the provinces in the metropolitan area. And districts, because they're in different parts of the world, will take the key themes and apply them in their areas, because they're all you can't write a strategy for the 32 districts as well. But the districts can take key themes like, yes, if, Royal Arch and Craft working seamlessly together, making sure that we not only have teamwork at the top level, but in lodges, there's a teamwork to look after all of the members, make sure we're doing it as we ought to, and rolling out things like members pathway. So it's been a real journey. I did the first presentation on the 3rd of May in Bath. And the last one, actually, I've also presented to the staff, to the MCF trustees, to the Library and Museum trustees. So I think at the end we did something like 17 or 18 individual presentations.
Wow.
Then we went off and worked on what do we want to say at the quarterly communication? What was the best way of getting that across? How do we want to articulate this for all the members? So, you know, so we started in May of 2020, and now it's still work in progress, but what bits work, what bit needs changing, because strategies evolve, and there'll be constant feedback. We're going to have constant dialogue. One of the other big differences from the 2015 to 2020 strategy is the rulers will be meeting with each of the regional communication groups and with individual provincial executives over the course to understand what's working, what do we need to work, what do we need to change, what unexpected things are coming up. How do we make this work for Freemasonry and for the members? Most important thing is that it's got to work for the members.
Absolutely. And let's talk about the members, because it's a relatively new strategy in the sense of the launch date. I had the huge honour of being part of that at Quarterly Communication in December. What feedback have you had, if any, so far since the launch in December?
Direct, but we've had feedback from provincial rulers, and we've had there's a link that went out YouTube. There have been some really interesting comments on the YouTube. I gather about 18,700 have looked at it, and some really interesting comments, which are helpful. But other than that, I will be asking provincial rulers to go and get the feedback from their lodges. I'll find out more, Brody, on Saturday, where I have no doubt that in the bar after the lodge meeting, I will get lots of feedback. Well, I hope I get lots of feedback, because it'll be things to think about.
Oh, they're Worcestershire Freemasons, so you'll get a lot of feedback from them. Don't you worry. I'm sure it'll all be positive. So you've alluded to the fact that it's essential that we keep a local flavour with the Met, with the districts, with the province. So what can individual members do now? Let's have a chat about that. What can individual members do, lodges, chapters, to help implement this strategy?
Fortunately, every single lodge or chapter has its own characteristics. And what I always, there are lodges you really, really enjoy going to. And there are other lodges which, for whatever reason, there's a bit of a struggle for them, for whatever reason. So for all of us, we've got to look at, let's see, what else might we do differently that might just engage the members? If we're getting members that are not coming, what can we do? Now, I saw a couple of things. It could be as simple as farming out the work, but in a different way. I was at Lodge Sine Nomine in earlier this year, and they did an initiation for 5 candidates. And the charge after initiation, conveniently, is broken up into 5 sections. There were 5 individual newer members. I mustn't call them younger, newer members, because they came in there were a variety of ages, but they were newer members who had learned their little section. And it was really interesting, because I was observing this. I was acting as junior warden. So I could see all the candidates. And I also have noticed that sometimes when it's a single person doing it, the candidates, because they've had a pretty overwhelming experience, can lose concentration. Yes. It was the first time where I have noticed, it doesn't always happen, but the candidates were really paying attention. It was the change, but also more members were involved in doing the ceremony. And so it's those sorts of things. The other things are, down to, well, how can we get people more involved? Can someone with particular skills assist the secretary or the treasurer or the DC or whatever it may be? And those are things. And it only takes a relatively small set of things for a lodge to try and to get a buzz. And if we all know that if we go to a lodge or a chapter with a buzz, and it applies equally to the Royal Arch, we can all think of how the Royal Arch ceremony might be done with more participation. And that's part of it. But it's also, how do we look after? I mean, we have a tendency as an organization, it's dangerous to generalize, that we say, oh, it's so-and-so's job to do this, be it mentor, be it almoner. But actually, every member of a lodge or chapter has a responsibility to look after all of the members. But there's a team, and the team isn't limited to the mentor or the almoner. But I think the almoner is not just about how to get access to the charitable support, but it's also about checking members are okay. If they've not been able to attend a lodge or a chapter for a while, why is that? It may be pressure of work. Well, we need to understand that, because we've all got to remember it's family first, it's work for those that are working, and then it's other things, including Freemasonry. And therefore, if we can get that sort of dialogue, I mean, unfortunately, there are instances where somebody is initiated, they're made extraordinarily welcome. Everybody talks to them. And then when they go to their second degree, they're largely ignored. Doesn't happen very often, luckily, but but it can happen. And that's the sort of thing we all need to think about, because we're all, I mean, I'm sure I've done it without meaning to, that, you know, there's somebody I don't know particularly well, that actually I'm talking to people that I know really well, right the way through the last 40 years. I'm sure I would have done that. But it's something that if we're all alert to it, and that way we make sure that we get the buzz and people enjoy it. And it's also things like, if we all say, for example, all ceremonies should be capable of being done from start to finish in less than 90 minutes. And if you've got a mix, both retired and working people in a lodge, and therefore you start at 6, 7:30, and dinner's over by 10, do you know what? It's doable for everyone. And that's the sort of thing that we need to think about. And there will be individual things that occur to people on the call who say, well, actually, we could do this slightly differently, and that just might do it. But the important thing is every lodge and chapter, if a small number of people take the responsibility, but also let people know what skills you've got. What is it you would like to do? We all hear stories of, through the chair, don't know what to do. Well, how about telling the lodge or the chapter, well, I'd be interested in assisting with this, and vice versa. Asking people, well, you've done this office. Where would you like? What skills do you want to do? And the other thing is, let's not overload anyone. We have, all organisations do this. Work-wise, anybody that's willing gets stuff piled on them over and over again, and then they get stretched too thinly. So get people, and one of the things we're doing in Grand Lodge is asking people to do, and I've asked a number of provincial Grand Masters who've done a working party about quarterly communication, should it move as a pilot. They won't be asked now to do another thing because they're busy doing other things. We'll ask some different people. We've tended, as an organisation, just to go back to the same few. They're trusted, they've done this very well. Well, let's now just try and do that a bit differently. And I've made the point to provincial rulers, you know, you use people with the right skills, but then don't overburden them.
Absolutely.
Give them a break that way. And so it's these sorts of things that just might help with people maintaining their interest, feeling they're contributing, but it's able to be balanced in the definite balancing act we all have to do in managing our lives.
Well, a lot of this is common sense, isn't it, essentially? So don't overload anybody. Put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's recently joined and imagine you were them back in the day and try different things. And if it doesn't work, you've tried it and you don't need to carry it.
Well, yeah, well, as somebody said to me recently, well, if you don't try it, how do you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, a few questions, Jonathan, if that's okay. And
yeah, of course.
You've had a lot of questions, as you can imagine. And ladies and gentlemen and brethren, as I said at the beginning of Solomon Live, I will not be able to get through all of them, but I'll give it my best shot. So Ronald Hurstwaite would like to ask you a question. He said, would it be true to say that themed lodges, i.e. football, vintage car, sports lodges, where there is a common interest among brethren, are proving more popular for recruitment?
That's a really interesting one. I was lucky enough to consecrate a rugby lodge. Many of you will know I'm devoted to rugby union in many ways. And I was lucky enough to be asked to consecrate a rugby lodge in Derby. And it's for what we used to call the three counties, Notts, Lincs, Derby, and had a real buzz because there was a real esprit de corps. And it is true that the special interest lodges can do it. And we had a lot of relatively newer Masons came to that, to see it. There was a huge buzz afterwards. So there is that, but it doesn't mean to say that it should that's not capable of being replicated in lodges which pull from all sorts of different backgrounds. Because clearly rugby players have all sorts of different backgrounds with a common theme to their lives. So it's not that it's the only way, but they are certainly proving to be a phenomenally successful way. And it's partly because there's a buzz. I mean, it was extraordinary, the buzz at this. Okay, it's a consecration. It's a special event. It's an absolutely never to be repeated as far as that lodge is concerned. But actually, we've come out of, and I'm sure that the ceremonies that they're doing, they're getting 2, 3, 4 candidates. And I do want to say something about multiple ceremonies as well, Brodie, which I'll come back to if I may. But they're getting the flow, and it's because the members are really enthusiastic, and we can capture that in many, many lodges, not just in the special interest lodges, but the special interest lodges really do work because there's that enthusiasm, and it's capturing that enthusiasm, which is infectious. We all know that if you really get enthusiastic people, then it's quite difficult not to enjoy yourself. And enjoyment is really what it's about.
So thank you, Ron. That is a superb question. Shailene has been in touch with us. Shailene, good evening. Thank you. He says, do you think that the progress we are making, including innovation, use of social media, membership, learning and development, whilst maintaining our tradition, is going at pace that will ensure our fraternity remain relevant and enjoyable for the next 100 years?
I think that if we can get the impetus right of this launch, yes, it was going absolutely in the right direction, but we need a bit more impetus. Because if we can get that impetus, then it's also, and one of the things to remember about the membership challenge, this is not huge changes that are looked for. This is all very deliverable. And I think we can pick up the pace a bit, but equally, one of the challenges that I'm very aware of is that over initiative, too many initiatives at once. So one of the things that we've been absolutely clear is we're going to have very few initiatives, and we're going to do them really well, and make sure they're really delivered before we go on to the other. So getting the impetus around that, and we've made huge strides over the last 4 or 5 years in all sorts of areas, and I'm really pleased about that. But I think we can pick up the pace. Because if we pick up the pace, then we will really achieve more than we've set out to achieve, which would be ideal. If we can achieve more and really see a set, then I'm 62, so I won't be there to see it. So I very much hope that we'll have a very successful 400th anniversary celebration, 350th anniversary celebration, etc. I don't see any reason why not, because this is all within our grasp. If we're brave enough to take it, it's that wonderful sidestep moment when you can see the try line, but it's not white line fever. There's a genuine opportunity, and that's how I see it. And if I may, Brodie, I just want to come back to the multiple ceremonies. One of the feedback I did get whilst we were doing the thing was from a brother who really felt this was, we can't do multiple ceremonies because it detracts from the experience of the candidate. And that is not, to my mind, the case. Well done. Clearly, the biggest constraint is actually the room. So some rooms, but I've seen and been part of ceremonies with 7, 8, 9 candidates. And I can tell you they were brilliantly done. But all of the candidates felt they were special, and there was an esprit de corps. And if you are a lodge with a waiting list, and you've only got 5 meetings a year, one of which is for installation for the new master, and you've only got 4 meetings, and you've got 6 waiting, it doesn't take a genius to work out that actually perhaps you need to think about doing it a bit differently. And we have had a case not so very far from where I live in Cambridge, where a lodge was determined to stand on the one that they were then persuaded to do, and they did it highly successfully. You need to think about it, but it can be done really, really well, and that's just as impressive for the candidates as it is for the individual. And so it's something that perhaps that's one of the yes ifs, and there are ways of doing it. and we can even run some masterclasses. Because if people want to know how to do it, well, we can show them.
That's a great idea, isn't it? And I've been to a couple of multiple initiations. I think 7 was one, and it was absolutely fantastic. And every one of those candidates felt part of the ceremony, and one of the best moments of their life, really. So it can be done, and done successfully as well. And let's go back to the launch of the strategy in December, quarterly communication. It was a very unique quarterly communication for many people, largely due to the fact there was a train strike and a lot of people couldn't get there, which was very frustrating. But the launch of the strategy was done rather uniquely. Perhaps you could tell us about that and why you decided to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean, there were a number of us who just wondered whether the dates were being set in order to disrupt quarterly communication and Grand Chapter. Yeah, it was. We've done all sorts of presentations over the years, but we thought we wanted to do it a bit differently, partly because we also had never done it that way. So with the Grand Secretary setting the scene, and then a panel discussion, and the panel discussion drawn from throughout England and Wales. You participated with different levels of experience, so from a provincial Grand Master to a Master Mason, with a provincial officer and a provincial Grand Secretary. And the inspiration for this came from one of the members of the strategy working group who'd actually been on a conference. And the speaker panel had worked really well with somebody setting the scene and then a discussion. And we thought, well, we've never done it this way. And on the basis of yes, if, let's see whether we can innovate. And it's a real pity that there were about 400 or 500, which was great to have as many as we had. I mean, the efforts that the brethren made to get to Great Queen Street were really phenomenal. I mean, there were brethren who'd organised coaches, minibuses. They had a rail service, 2 trains an hour. They came down, they got there, they had to leave early to get back. You know, there was a lot of effort, but we also thought we'd try the streaming for provincial rulers that couldn't make it because it was just hopeless from the further extremes of England and Wales to get there. District rulers couldn't necessarily get there. So for them, and then recording it and putting it out for the membership. Now, on all of these things, there are lessons that are learned. The lesson for us was learned that perhaps you should have all been mic'd up a little better, that actually the acoustic in the Grand Temple is awful, and that perhaps I should have had an auto cue rather than looking down and reading my quarterly communication address off a piece of paper. But the point was, it was done differently. It enabled members to see it differently rather than just having a talking head at them. And the sort of dialogue that you and the rest of the panel were able to have with the Grand Secretary, I'd really like to know from those that are on this, you know, just send them the message to the team tonight and just say, did it work? Because that's the sort of feedback, because it's not something you would use all the time. But for some things, it might be a really effective way of doing it.
Well, I think a lot of people respected how unique it was in particular. And there was a lot of people at various levels from around the country involved in that, in which I had the honour to do that as well. So thank you for giving me the chance to be part of that. But during quarterly communication, there was an intake of breath, Jonathan. Do you remember when you announced the appointment of a second assistant Grand Master, Stephen Varley? Tell me about that moment and why you decided to give Stephen that huge honour.
I have to admit, Brodie, I didn't hear the intake of breath because I was so taken with actually getting the script out. So everyone told me. So it just goes to show, a bit like when you're delivering ritual in a lodge, you just focus on what you're doing. The background for it is that the Grand Masters had the power for many years to appoint more than one assistant Grand Master. And in the past, we have had more than one assistant Grand Master, but for relatively short periods. So an assistant Grand Master goes into office ahead of a change of Programme Master, then the other assistant Grand Master goes up to Deputy Grand Master. That happened in the early 1980s when Lord Cornwallis was taking over from Lord Cadogan, and Ted Bailey was taking over from Lord Cornwallis, and Lord Farnham was made the second assistant Grand Master. But we've never had an assistant Grand Master for an extended period. And as I said earlier, the Craft and the Royal Arch rulers work as a team. And there were five of us in it. And I just advised the Grand Master for us to get the engagement that we wish to have in respect of providing seeing how the strategy is going, working out what we need to do, and also just being able to cover the ground in visiting the provinces, the Met, both in the Craft and the Royal Arch. We needed an extra assistant Grand Master. And I thought long and hard about the recommendation to the Grand Master as to who that should be. So the Grand Master fully accepted and was happy to agree to the appointment because it was his decision. And then Stephen Varley's been very heavily involved with developing the revised members pathway. And really knows it. And the members pathway, the revised version, takes what was done in the original members pathway, which was a great start. And as we're looking to evolve and develop, we've learned from things that went well in the original version, the things that didn't quite work as well as we would have hoped, and we've refreshed it. And it's the really clear guidance about interviews, for example, of candidates, three members of the lodge doing it, so it doesn't overwhelm. It's not like an admiralty board where you have 13 or 14 sat there, or whatever it may be. And Stephen's real knowledge, and he was a very effective provincial Grand Master. He's from the North Midlands, so we're not wholly stuck in the bubble of London and the home counties. And I'm sure he'll do an excellent job.
Well, he sounds like the ideal candidate, actually, and this prompts me to pose this question, or to put this question to you, Stuart Morgan. He says, how does all this fit with Pathway Initiative? Is it dead? Well, clearly it's not. We've just discussed it, but obviously Stuart would like to know the answer. Actually, how does all this fit in with Pathway?
The members pathway is an integral part of assisting delivery on the strategy, and the revised version is one of the reasons why I'm about to send a letter to provincial rulers, inviting them to particular pathway workshops, which a ruler will attend with them to go through it, understand how it all works, and get the rollout in all the lodges, in all the provinces and the Met area. It really is, so it's nowhere is it dead, but it's something that I think and then we'll get the feedback and see which bits need further refinement, which bits don't work, so therefore we'll do something a bit different. But no, it's very much about that, because if we can get it right when somebody is joining, so they know what they're joining and what it is Freemasonry is and why it's a fit for them, and why the lodge members feel that the new member is also a fit for them, then we've got a much better chance of making sure that people's members stay. And if for a variety of reasons that it's not quite the right fit, but they still want to be a Mason, but the timing of the lodge meeting doesn't quite work for them, or whatever it may be, then we're able to deal with it. And it's our members are the best ambassadors for why do you want to be a Mason, and hopefully it's going to help them, and it's an initiative that this is one of the few that we'll be really concentrating on for the next 2 or 3 years at least, to really try and get that out. I mean, one of the challenges of the original version was it was very fits and starts and wasn't necessarily rolled out consistently. So one of the other things that we've said in launching the strategy, we want to be consistent, and we want to make sure things are done effectively.
Yes.
And the other thing that I'm engaging with the provincial rulers is to make sure every one of us feels that at the provincial executive level and Grand Lodge, we are responsible for membership. Not just the membership officer. I've said this in the context of the lodge, but it also applies across provincial executives. Every single member, to my mind, every visiting officer, because each province and Met have a different system, but every one of them should feel responsible for how are the members doing in the lodges for which they have a responsibility.
So I just had a look at the time. I can't believe how quickly this has gone. I think we've got time for two more questions. I just looked down in shock. So a couple of questions before we call it an evening. So we've discussed why we need to do this. We've discussed how long it's taken to organise the strategy, what kind of work's gone into it. You've mentioned a few things that we can do in our lodges, provinces, districts, Crown Lodge, to help pull all this together. But how are we going to measure this? How are we going to measure the impact of the strategy?
Well, it's one of those things where we've thought long and hard, because as I said earlier, this is all achievable. So what we've said is for the UGLE numbers, and we will be talking to every single province in the Met area for what is the membership challenge, and for encouraging provincial rulers to discuss that with their membership, because it really does range across the provinces from 4% to a much higher number. So what we've said is that we want for UGLE as a whole, for the membership to be growing by 1% a year by year 3 and 2% by year 7. We're hoping for every single province to improve the participation rate of their craft members in the Royal Arch. Again, it ranges because different provinces have different things about it. And it ranges from low 20s to middle 50s in terms of percent. And that's really, really important. We're also asking all provinces, because they're all in different places, to improve on their membership challenge every year from year 2. And then the final thing is we've had a period of time where we have lost too many newer members within 3 years of their joining. And to reduce that percentage, I mean, the last time I looked at numbers, 17%, which is far too high. So something's not right somewhere. We want to get that down to below 10% by year 3 and below 5%. And one of the interesting comments on the YouTube page was, well, we always have resignations, and therefore we shouldn't worry too much about it. And because sometimes it's just not right for someone. Even with the best will in the world, it's just not the right fit for them, either timing or whatever. That's fine. But actually, if we just say, well, we always get resignations, therefore we don't need to worry, then that's rather complacent. So we just need to think about that. So that's the final bit, and we'll be looking, and we'll also give feedback how we're doing. But one of the things, as I said earlier, Brody, is this is very doable, and if we all, it would be great if everyone were able to do it, but some people won't have time to do it. But I fully understand that, and if we can get that momentum really going, I can see the members really delivering on this and really enjoying their Freemasonry and feeling engaged with it.
I think this is very achievable. I really do mean that. From every level that I work with, including provincial communications officer, I think we can all do this. Jonathan, one final question before we say goodbye. We've got a lot of brethren watching us this evening. 3 things they can do, 3 things a brother can do when they leave us this evening, or maybe tomorrow. Let's give them a night off to help with the strategy.
Think about what would they do differently in their lodge to try and give them a buzz. What doesn't quite work? Think about what skills that they've got and talk to someone and say, I've got these skills, I can help in this area. And thirdly, really not only enjoy their masonry, but be seen to enjoy their masonry.
Sage advice. Jonathan Spence, our programme master. Sir, have you enjoyed your Solomon Live experience?
Well, I was nervous as hell beforehand, Brady, but it's been great. And I'd just like to thank everyone that's listened in, because that's a huge chunk out of their evening. And so thank them, you and the team and them for listening to me, which are on.
No, not at all. We've all walked away with a lot of things to think about. Jonathan, sir, thank you very much indeed. Our next Solomon Live, ladies and gentlemen and brethren, will be on Tuesday, the 21st of February, and it's entitled 1723 Constitutions Inventing the Future. Now, 2023 marks the tercentenary of the publication in London of the 1723 Constitutions. There is a lot of excitement about this year, but we'll chat to Dr. Rick Berman, who will discuss the importance of this document from the Enlightenment to the present day on Tuesday, the 21st of February. And in typical fashion, we'll begin at 7:30, so get yourself signed up for that. And if you haven't done so already, please make sure you register for Solomon. solomon.ugle.org.uk, full of useful and fantastic content, your daily advancement in Masonic knowledge. Until then, thank you for joining us this evening. Happy New Year, and we will see you back here very, very soon. Good night.